i'r drafodaeth yma cwricwlwm heddi gyda chanolbarth De Cymru. Fi yw Meurig Jones, fi yw Prif Athro Ysgol Gymraeg Llangynwyd. Good afternoon all and welcome to this roundtable discussion of a curriculum with Central South. It's great to have people with us today and we are happy to receive any questions that you may ask of the panel. We've had some come through already, so we will be looking at these and hopefully getting the answers to you as you required via this session. But first of all, I'd like to go to the panel and to introduce everybody. Can I please go to Tom first, please?
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Tom Breeze and I'm a senior lecturer at Cardiff Metropolitan University, which is the sort of core member of the Cardiff Partnership for Initial Teacher Education. So I'm involved in the training of the next generation of teachers. I primarily work in the secondary music programme, but I also work generically across the rest of the programmes. And huge thanks to Central South for inviting me along today.
Diolch, Tom. Can I go to Kath next, please? Kath.
Bore da bawb. Yeah, I'm Kath Lewis. I'm the Principal Improvement Partner for Curriculum, Cohesion and Assessment at Central South Consortium.
Diolch, Kath. Nicky.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicky Hagendyk. I'm the Strategic Lead for Humanities, including RVE at Central South, and I also lead on diversity across the curriculum.
Diolch, Nicky. And then finally, Craig.
Yeah, prynawn da pawb. My name's Craig Wade. I'm Associate Advisor for Curriculum at Central South and also lead on RSE.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, bawb. So hopefully today now we can just go over some of these questions that have been coming in via our schools for you. Fel ys I weid, hoffwn I dderbyn unrhyw gwestiynau boed yn y Gymraeg neu Saesneg. If you have any questions in any Welsh or English, please send them through and then we'll pass these on to the panel. And I ddechrau off, we'll start off with Kath Lewis, I think. Kath, people have been asking about, baseline assessment. Can you give us a brief outline then, please, about what is happening with these baseline assessments, please?
Yeah, no problem, Meurig. So 2021-22 is the final year requiring statutory foundation phase baseline assessment. So it really is about the foundation phase baseline assessment itself. It is gone in terms of the outcomes are removed. We don't now need to use that baseline assessment, but we know there are some schools who find the baseline assessment helpful as a point of starting in terms of the progressive statements within there for literacy and numeracy, physical and social and emotional development. So some of what's within the current baseline assessment can be supportive for schools, but in terms of, I'll give you a quote from the framework, again, constantly taking everything back to source, to ensure schools and settings have the flexibility to align their on-entry assessments with their curriculum. It is for schools to determine the detail of their assessment arrangements. So that is true across any entry point along that continuum, and that includes the baseline. So by all means, use the foundation-based assessment to support, but always remembering that it's in support of the curriculum that you've designed, and that there will be no requirement to report upon any previous outcomes or levels.
Okay, I think that's going to be helpful for people as they've been putting this planning into place. But as I say, maybe other questions now may stem from your answer. So as we say, if you do have anything you'd like us to answer further, please jot it down and we'll get back to you. One of the elements that's been coming through from these questions today is looking about the role of the governing body. And I think, Craig, probably I'll direct this to you, is, how does the governing body need to formally adopt this curriculum?
Yeah, thanks, Meurig. So in terms of how schools go about formally adopting their curriculum, the duty does lie with the head teacher and the governing body to agree to adopt the school's curriculum and assessment arrangements, and subsequently then publish a summary of it. And the agreement between the head teacher and the governing body should be part of a governing body meeting, and the agreement to adopt then formally recorded in the minutes of that meeting. So obviously you'd expect that this meeting wouldn't be the first time that the governing body would have heard about the school planning a new curriculum, or this little thing called Curriculum for Wales. So I'm sure that there would have been lots of discussions about how the curriculum and preparations for the curriculum have been developing, already documented in governing body meetings. However, as I said, there does need to be a formal meeting where a school's curriculum and assessment arrangements are officially adopted, following whatever processes the governing body has in a particular school for making curate decisions. And then from rollout, the head teacher and the governing body also have a duty to keep the adopted curriculum and assessment arrangements up for review, and they've got to revise them if need be. And then subsequently, if they've been revised and any changes have been made, they need to update their curriculum and assessment arrangement summaries as a result of that.
So you've just mentioned about that published summary. You know, what information are we expecting schools to include in that published summary then?
Yeah, well, recently actually Welsh Government produced a flyer with information about how schools could create their summaries, and at Central South as well. We've produced some information, some guidance around that, which we've put on the Curriculum for Wales community area, around the commentary, what the commentary might look like, and also some fantastic examples of curriculum summaries that we've gathered from across the region. So you can access those via our Curriculum for Wales community area. But in terms of what schools need to include in their summary, first of all, obviously you've got to adopt your curriculum, as I mentioned earlier, and then produce a summary. And Welsh Government quite clear, you know, it is just that, it is a summary. And in that, you need to include information about how practitioners in your school or setting, learners, parents, carers, and the wider community have been engaged with the process of curriculum development. Secondly, then you need to think about how your curriculum meets the required elements of Curriculum for Wales. So starting with those 4 purposes and working your way through the required elements. So how does it align to the, how does it include progression against the progression code, it's broad and balanced, all of those different things within the required elements. Then information about how the school is going to be approaching learning progression and arrangements for assessment. And then finally, how the school's curriculum will be kept under review, including the process for feedback and ongoing revision. And one of the questions that came up from the keynote today was about curriculum. When do we need to adopt our curriculum and provide our curriculum summary? And that's from rollout. So for September rollout in 2022, that will be all primary schools and those secondary schools that have opted for a September 22 rollout. But if you've deferred till September 2023, that's when you need to think about adopting your curriculum and producing your curriculum summary.
Diolch, Craig. I think I'll just turn to Kath for the next questions. Coming similar theme here is about what arrangements should schools have in place to identify progress made by individual learners?
Okay, so in terms of, this is one of the opportunities that Curriculum for Wales gives, I suppose, to schools. It's certainly seen by many at the moment as a challenge, but that's something we can work through together, because the assessment information, the assessment arrangements within a school are very much for that school to determine. So in terms of, you know, schools and settings determine what assessment information is gathered on learner progress, and then how it's recorded and how it's used to help inform next steps. So it's really important that we are, as schools, gathering information that's relevant, that's appropriate to identify those next steps in learning, to identify progress made for individuals, but also that we're doing it for groups of learnings as well. We need to still have a sense of how different groups of learners are making progress against the curriculum we've designed. And really the piece of work on developing a shared understanding of progression, there's a national piece of work coming now with Cardiff dyfodol, with Welsh Government, and lots of national network conversations have been around progression and assessment, and this piece that we referred to in the first keynote on understanding shared understanding of progression being really crucial, so that we've got a sense then of individual learner progress and groups in relation not just to the curriculum we've designed, but curricula across the cluster and beyond that cluster as well. Because of course, you know, now we don't have those nationally prescribed outcomes or levels or attainment judgments So assessment has to be for the school to decide what information is gathered, how it's recorded, how it is communicated back with parents, and so collaborations are really important to that.
So just picking on that point there now, if I'm looking at how would you suggest schools should go about recording and reporting then on learners' progress?
There's some really helpful, clear guidance, you know, on the website about schools recording and reporting. Also in the frequently asked questions pack that we released end of March, that was one of them. So it says, you know, how should schools be recording and reporting learner progress? And again, it says there that, you know, we need to report at least termly on learner progress, but we need to formally report in terms of written reports once a year. So there is such clear guidance there, and I'm just going to refer you to where that guidance is. So it's hub.gov.wales, Curriculum for Wales, and you find that within the assessment arrangements guidance. There's a whole section regarding making and implementing assessment arrangements, and there's a section there on supporting you for also with guidelines over what to include in that formal annual report. It doesn't give you those attainment, those numbers or the judgments, but in terms of need to report upon learner progress against the identified curriculum, but also learner well-being. So I would urge, as we always do, everybody back to source to go to the Hub framework, because the answers are there.
I can see there's a question just coming in live that's asking us about the recording and reporting, about have unions been consulted on this procedure? Are you aware of any information you'd like to share on that bit?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. But as far as we're aware, unions, wider stakeholders have worked with Welsh Government right throughout the process of co-constructing Curriculum for Wales. So they've been fully informed at every point.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm just going to move on then to look at questions come in about how do schools plan for the religion, values and ethics in September when the agreed syllabi aren't yet published. I think, Nicky, it'd be best to direct that question to you, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is that the position of RVE, religion, values and ethics in the curriculum, is a little different to currently RE. RVE sits very much within the curriculum. It's within the humanities AOLE, and RVE has parity with all of the other subjects within the humanities AOLE. So obviously the subject contributes to learning in relation to all of the humanities statements of what matters. And in addition to that, there is, because obviously RVE is a mandatory subject, there is RVE specific statutory guidance that's currently on Hub. It sits in the designing your curriculum section of the humanities guidance. That specific guidance on RVE is statutory guidance that schools and settings must pay regard to. There is also some other guidance in the legislation section as well about the legislative position of RVE. So in terms of what information we've got at the moment to be planning RVE from, we have quite extensive information within the Humanities AOLE guidance, the Humanities AOLE itself and the statements of what matters, but then you've also got that statutory guidance as well. But the question is right, legally schools do also have to have regard to the locally agreed syllabus for RVE. So we've got, out of our 5 local authorities in CSC, 2 have voted on and agreed their locally agreed syllabus, and it's going before Cabinet very shortly. 3 more are doing that within the next couple of weeks. Legally, every school will have a final copy of their local authority syllabus by the 1st of September. I think I probably want to reassure people and say that all of our SACRAs have been thoroughly involved in writing the Humanities AOLE and supporting the Humanities AOLE during the whole curriculum design process, and in writing that statutory guidance. And we're really very, very confident that all 5 of the locally agreed syllabi from our region will be entirely in line with the statutory guidance on RVE that is on Hub. And we're very confident that if schools at the moment are using the humanities guidance and using the statutory RVE guidance, you will be also fulfilling your legal responsibility to consider what will be in your locally agreed syllabus once it's published. I just flag up a couple of meetings. We're having a primary humanities network meeting on the 5th of July and a secondary RVE network meeting on the 11th of July. And in both of those meetings, the locally agreed syllabus will be on the agenda to be discussed. Okay.
Yeah, if we could share those dates maybe in the bulletin. from Central South. I think that would help the different sectors. I'm just going to direct this next question to Tom. Are there any practical examples of common concept or cooperative development that we can explore in the context of Curriculum for Wales, particularly within the foundation phase?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Initially, I'm going to need to get my excuses in first, because obviously, as I said at the start of this, I am a secondary specialist with enormous respect for my colleagues in the foundation phase. But I work with several colleagues in the foundation phase with whom I have a good enough professional relationship that they can tell me when I'm talking rubbish because I don't work in the foundation phase. So apologies in advance for anything that perhaps needs a little bit of work before it will actually work in the foundation phase. I will do my best. And of course, for anyone that watched the keynote presentation that I gave, this is very much rooted in the expressive arts. And I think there is a very interesting piece of work to be done to see where this does transfer into other areas of learning and experience. But with those two caveats out of the way, I'll do my best to give you some goodies to work with. The first thing to bear in mind is that these two approaches, which I mentioned in the keynote presentation, the aim of those approaches was to avoid what went wrong when I first had a go at some of this kind of cross-curricular work in expressive arts, which was the short-changing of a subject discipline, it being reduced to its lowest common denominator through not having the right sort of safeguards in place when you're planning. And I mean, as a music specialist myself, my sort of big bugbear is when music gets reduced to the status of sound effects, for example, to accompany something. There's a big difference between sound effects and music. And I know my colleague Emma tends to grind her teeth if people plump for the freeze frame sort of tableau every single time when other things are available. So what we're trying to do is to avoid kind of reducing something down to that level. And in looking to do that, what we need to do is make sure that key kind of skills are being developed in multiple subject disciplines at once. Taking the cooperative development one first of all, and I'm hoping this one might be potentially useful for the foundation phase. You may have noticed if you watched my presentation, there was a still of our students doing a little project. I've dug out the video of that so that we can answer the question with the video. It's only about 10 or 11 seconds long. So if you want to pin me so I'm big on your screen, then go right ahead now, because I'm just going to very quickly play the video. This involves some drumming, and it also involves some sort of choreographed movement. So it sort of joins those two things together. So let's just watch the students doing their thing for a couple of seconds.
1, 2, 3.
So there it is, really, really short. But what we liked about that piece of work with the students was that the elements of the music, so when it got faster, when it got louder, when it got slower, were reflected in the elements of the movement. So they had made creative decisions that when it was louder, their movements should be bigger and more sort of exaggerated, and when it was quieter, not only did they move less, they also moved downwards in level. So it's that kind of connection of the nuts and bolts of the creative discipline, and being able to sort of make those links between one and the other, which allows perhaps a pupil who's less confident in one to make progress in the other, but both of them are equally represented. So I hope that one, the cooperative development one, gives you a bit of food for thought for how you could potentially very easily combine some subject disciplines. The other one, the common concept, what I liked about that, and this might take a bit of work in the foundation phase, but maybe work elsewhere, is the idea that you translate from one to another, and they use the double page spread. And I think any sort of creative discipline in which you can have one facing the other or one next to the other, and when you hit a creative problem in one, you can switch to the other and solve that problem in a more comfortable area, is potentially really fertile ground. And the beauty of that is different pupils will be switching in different directions at different times. So you sort of need them to be there simultaneously, kind of in front of them or available to them, so they can move at their own kind of pace or in response to their own needs from one to the other, and then translate back again to translate the problem that they've solved into the discipline that they struggle with a little bit more. So maybe some interesting ideas to take away there. I mean, keeping it, really, really simple and going right down to the nuts and bolts in order to kind of preserve the dignity of all of our subject disciplines when we try and do this. And I know that there's loads of good stuff coming out of CSC in relation to supporting this. I'm going to hand over to Nicky now, who's going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I was just going to flag up here really the curriculum design programme that's happened very recently, where there was over 100 schools from different parts of Wales involved in this curriculum design programme. And you used, Tom, I noticed that phrase nuts and bolts several times. And I think that's kind of where the beginning of that curriculum design programme came from. We're starting to look from a subject specific point of view at exactly that. What are the key concepts? What are the key skills? What are the key areas of knowledge? And how does it progress? And then, after that process, what then happens is the bringing together through the designing of kind of the modules that we were doing it towards the end of that programme. So there is a huge wealth of resources that came along with that programme, large numbers of expert inputs, including from people like yourself, and lots of materials that were developed as part of that programme. So as you were talking, I was thinking how useful it would be for schools to explore those resources as well. And I noticed as well that the question focuses on foundation phase. Obviously in Central South and across all regions in Wales, we have foundation phase advisors, we have foundation phase support teams who are able to provide networking opportunities, discussion opportunities, and also bespoke support to schools as well. So I think there's a wealth of opportunities there to engage with these ideas and to really try to move forward with it. So hopefully that's some helpful additions to what you were saying, Tom.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thanks to you both. Can I ask anybody, if you've got any questions, if you could please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. It enables us to be able to see the questions coming through rather than raising hands. I've got a question here from Angela, who's asking, there was talk of Welsh Government creating skills, knowledge, ladder type resources. Do you know anything of where we are with that information? Kath, if I could ask you.
Yeah, no, there are no plans at all for Welsh Government to create anything additional. That the guidance that we've got is the guidance, the framework that we've got is the framework. There's the national network conversations that are happening. That's that many of you might have already been involved with. They are an opportunity for practice to feed into policy, for policy to engage with practice. So where there are practitioners who may feel that something like that is needed, there are opportunities, there are mechanisms by which you can engage with conversations directly with Welsh Government. But no, there are no plans to produce anything of that nature. The way to approach the identification of those skills, but the knowledge, the experiences as well, is through developing that shared understanding of progression, working within your cluster, working outside of your cluster with other networks of schools, engaging with the curriculum for Wales professional learning that we've got here at CSC, that every one of the regions of partnerships has got a comprehensive programme to support you to be able to design that curriculum, so that actually we don't need at a national level the certain policy-wide sort of skills ladders and things like that. So no, there are no plans, but that's why those national network conversations are really important for you to be able to participate in and discuss those things directly with Welsh Government and that shared understanding of progression.
I know as a consortium, there'll be opportunities to show good practice and examples being shared amongst colleagues. So I think as time goes by, we'll start to see those pieces come through as well, won't we?
Yeah, and just to add to that, Meurig, within this virtual conference platform, if you go to the exhibition halls, there are virtual booths in each of those. So, for example, there's one on curriculum design, and you'll see then tabs for schools, by schools. So we've captured, as part of this conference and ongoing, examples of schools, the processes by which they have engaged in curriculum design, and that then is holistically as curriculum design as a whole, but also looking at, for example, design in terms of diversity, design in expressive arts. And so just keep an eye out in those areas, the exhibition hall, for the for schools by schools section of resources, because we've got lots of schools have fed into this conference today and have recorded really, really interesting sessions for us.
That's great. Diolch, Kath. I'm just going to move on because questions seem to be coming in now. This is when a common question seems to be rising now. Does relationships and sexuality education need to be mandatory for every child? I think, Craig, maybe you're the best person to come in for us on that, please. Yeah,
definitely. Well, the simple answer to that question is yes. RSE is a mandatory element of Curriculum for Wales and the Curriculum and Assessment Act. And that spans the whole learning continuum now in all schools and settings. So this means for learners, excuse me, right from age 3 up to age 16. So with that, it now being a mandatory element, it obviously means that the right to withdraw learners, the parental right to withdraw learners from RSE lessons that currently exists in our current curriculum arrangements no longer exists from curriculum rollout. In terms of RSE in Curriculum for Wales, I think what's useful is to think of RSE as now needing to be developed in sort of three ways in schools and settings. The first way is as sort of essential learning in its own right through your dedicated RSE lessons or sessions, as it has been for a while in schools and done for a long time in schools. But also we have now RSE not only as that sort of discrete learning, but also as a cross-cutting theme across all areas of learning and experience. So within each area of learning and experience now, there's a responsibility as a cross-cutting theme to develop and make links with RSE where appropriate. And then the sort of third way then of how RSE needs to be developed in schools is that whole school approach. So how as a school or setting are you ensuring that you're linking all areas of school, so your curriculum, your policy, engagement with learners, staff, the community, to ensure now that we're creating a consistent and inclusive approach to RSE. So as part of the mandatory status, what schools and settings are going to need to do is to use the RSE code to provide that, and that's the really important part, that developmentally appropriate learning now and teaching in RSE, using the code and the code setting out the 3 different strands of learning. So we've got relationships and identity, sexual health and well-being, and empowerment, safety and respect. And in the code, what we have is the content for each of those strands set out in those 3 developmentally appropriate phases. So phase 1 is from age 3, phase 2 being from age 7, and then phase 3 being from age 11. So we've recently published a number of resources, and we have an ongoing programme of professional development around RSE, provided by not only our lead practitioners, but our external providers, Professor Reynolds from Cardiff University, who is providing a keynote presentation later on today, and Dr. McGeaney from the University of Sussex, to support schools with that, so that they can audit and map the current sort of situation in terms of RSE learning and teaching, and then think about the RSE code and how they can use that to start to think about what the learning might look like moving forward from rollout against the particular strands and learning within the RSE code. In terms of the cross-cutting theme then, across the curriculum, what's really useful, and I know that Nicky mentioned this for RVE as well, that the design in your curriculum section within each AOLE is so useful, because what that does is the cross-curricular skills, the cross-cutting themes, it really breaks down how RSE, for example, or diversity, human rights, etc., how can that be developed through a particular area? So that gives really clear advice about how RSE can be developed through expressive arts, through humanities, through NLC, in each of those areas. And next year, what we're hoping to do is to focus a bit more on that cross-cutting theme of RSE. And we have an RSE code mapping tool that helps you to think about how is RSE being delivered across the areas of learning and experience, and all of that is available in the Curriculum for Wales community area that we've got, and also in the RSE booth that's part of today's conference for VFE. And then finally, just to finish off by talking about that whole school approach. So as well as the RSE code, within the Curriculum for Wales guidance, what we have is the statutory guidance within Hub, within Curriculum for Wales, that schools need to have regard to when they're planning their approach to RSE. So yes, it gives details about what the RSE code is, but it also gives a lot more detailed guidance about how schools should be developing, for example, the leadership of RSE in schools, how you can engage the community, parents and carers, external partners, etc. How you should be developing high quality professional learning as well in schools. So we also have a tool available to help with that whole school approach. It's a self-evaluation mapping for the future RSE tool, set out across 8 domains of a whole school approach to RSE. That can be a really good starting point for schools to evaluate where are we currently in terms of developing our whole school approach to RSE, and where are the opportunities now for us to develop our practice further. So I really would advise going into the RSE booth today and having a look at the resources that we've got available to help schools in terms of developing RSE in schools.
Okay, thanks for that, Craig. I just want to probably bring Nicky in here now, looking about diversity then across schools. You know, what is Central South doing to support schools with developing that diversity within our curriculum?
Yeah, thanks, Meurig. So yeah, diversity is one of those cross-cutting themes that Craig's been talking about there. It's alongside, you know, human rights and careers and RSE as well. So diversity is really about respecting and celebrating all types of diversity. And because it's a cross-cutting theme, that needs to be embedded across all of the areas of learning and experience. I think it's probably quite prominent, both in Central South planning at the moment and in schools planning, because of other things that are going on at the moment. So you would have seen very recently, Welsh Government have published the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan at the beginning of June. And so I think there's a lot of conversations and discussions going on about the relationship between an anti-racist approach within school and a diverse curriculum within school. And I think that's probably why diversity is very prominent, certainly in terms of our work in Central South, but also in terms of schools' considerations for their curriculum. So we've done quite a lot of work supporting the DARPL programme, and you'll see on this conference today links to the DARPL programme, and I'd encourage everyone to have a look at the booth there and to engage with the DARPL programme, which is the Diversity and Anti-Racist Professional Learning programme that's been funded by Welsh Government, and that we're very pleased to be one of their partners in supporting that programme. Within Central South, we have begun to develop quite a large number of resources and materials to support schools to consider diversity. So we've got a booth here today looking at diversity in the curriculum, and I'd really encourage everyone to pop along to the booth and see the resources that we've started to put together. So we've got a short video introducing diversity across the curriculum. We've got prompt questions, we've got podcasts from schools, we've got a couple of recordings from schools who have started to look at diversity across the curriculum. We've also been focusing on it in some of our network meetings, especially within humanities and in LLC across the curriculum as well. Next year, we're going to be looking more within our networks to start considering diversity a little bit more. We're funding lead practitioners and providing some bespoke professional learning opportunities towards the end of this term, but also more coming in the autumn term. So there's going to be a sort of increased focus on this from Central South's point of view. I would also mention as well, recently we've advertised our funded projects, and we have some funded project opportunities that focus on diversity across the curriculum that I'd very much encourage everyone to have a look at as well. So we are trying as best we can to support schools as much as possible with diversity across the curriculum. So please visit the booth this afternoon and do get in touch if there's anything else that you think we can do to support schools.
Definitely, yeah, I think that's a lot of information there that we know that is available for schools, and hopefully they can have that time just to check into the booth to find out. And if there's any other questions, please post them on. There's a question here probably looking at, are there plans to produce an additional layer of guidance to support schools in curriculum design? Kath, I think that may be one for you.
Okay, in terms of The regions and partnerships provide professional learning for curriculum design, and is a comprehensive programme of professional learning for curriculum design, of which the programme that we've already referenced, where we brought practitioners together across Wales to receive expert input, to look at a process of designing a curriculum. It was one particular approach to designing curriculum, and it looked at identifying common concepts and mapping progression against those. So we, in terms of, there is no further guidance from Welsh Government. I think probably everybody would agree there's a wealth of guidance already. I know my colleagues here have already referenced the guidance within the designing your curriculum section of Hub, both the overarching part of the guidance and the subsection that's within each AOLE. There is so much there to help in Hub, but of course it's making sense of it, and that's where we come in. So we support our schools to make sense of the guidance that's there. We constantly say we take everything back to source, so responses that we give, whether it's a question in a panel like this, whether it's an email, it's a quick phone call from somebody, it's always taking that answer. So you don't get Kath Lewis's version of an answer, or Craig or Nicky, you're having direct from that source. So we very much see our position as supporting schools to make sense of that guidance, and then supporting with mechanisms to enable schools to network, to receive the professional learning input and experiences that support them. The design thinking model that we launched with our schools back in September, that is still a really helpful model, a framework for progressing through the process of designing a curriculum, and we know many of our schools use that to great effect, and of course we can come out and support schools with that as well. But there is certainly nothing more needed at that policy level in terms of designing a curriculum. It's just having the time and space now to make that happen across our clusters networks, and where possible engaging therefore with those national networks on curriculum design, on progression and assessment, so that we're constantly feeding policy to practice, and then the other way around as well, from practice to policy.
Right, diolch am hwnna. There's another progression question coming here, Kath, so I'm directing this to yourself once again. How can we best plan for progression when many children from schools outside of my geographic cluster transition to my high school? This was a question that raised its head in Cymraeg last week from schools in West Wales, where they have many a primary school feeding into them, some from outside of their geographical one, and I think it seems to be an issue that's raising its head here in Central South as well.
Thank you, Meurig. I think that is a really good question, of course. And, one of the clusters that we're currently working with all members of the curriculum team are working with, has got 22 primary schools and a secondary within that cluster. There are very large, diverse clusters. Some schools within our clusters are schools of 2 teachers, some are schools of 150 teachers. So there are certainly diverse needs. We're there to support you, along the journey. I think it's really important, and again, to draw you back to guidance, at whatever point a learner enters a school or setting, again, these are Welsh Government's words, practitioners should understand where they are in their learning and the progression they have made to date. So it's bringing us back to those on-entry assessments that it talks about in the guidance. So whether we're receiving children from within the cluster or outside of that geographical cluster, it's doing that on-entry assessment. Now, that on-entry assessment isn't a thing in its own right. It's not, a pro forma assessment, but it's just having conversations. It's understanding what learning has taken place, where the strengths are in the learning, and what the next steps for that individual learner will be, and then determining how we're going to integrate that learner based on their prior experiences into our curriculum. And so again, that is really important. And again, the guidance says where available, practitioners should take into account information provided by those who have previously supported the education of the learner. So again, the quality of conversations at every level across our system is just huge, isn't it? And we know that having conversations takes time, building relationships takes time, but that is very much the intention.
Okay, so I'll give you a little rest for a minute, Kath, and I'm going to move on to direct this next question to Craig. So I've got a question coming through here from Priest. He says, have Welsh Government indicated any attainment judgments they will ask for? Levels are supposedly not useful, yet we have had to provide year 9 levels this year anyway. So I think that could be a question. I'm just going to give it to you, Craig.
Yeah, no, the Welsh Government have not indicated any attainment judgments. There's no expectation at all. I think one of the things when we're out visiting schools that they think schools are going to be asked to report on the number of students, for example, that have reached progression step 2 or progression step 3, and report on the number of students that have achieved progression step 3 and haven't, and what a school's going to do. That is not the expectation of Welsh Government at all. The focus really is on progression. You know, how are we focusing on progression and the progression that learners make in terms of their knowledge, their skills, etc. Importantly, how are we moving learners on in terms of their progression and taking them through to their next steps? So no, there are no expectations at all in terms of attainment judgments, but it's a real focus. And I hope that's come across today through the keynote presentations as well that Kathryn and Chris have provided around real focus on progression.
Okay, diolch, Craig. Kathryn, I'm going to go to you with this question now. In regard to assessment, is there anything available, spreadsheet, matrix, for example, that helps schools assess the Welsh medium statements across the AOLEs?
Okay, or the what matters statements expect, but yes, but yeah, again, assessments, arrangements at a school or setting level are a matter for individual schools and settings to determine. So from the words of Welsh Government, there is nothing available at a national level, or it wouldn't be appropriate either for us to be producing spreadsheet matrix. I think, again, if we look at the assessment guidance on Hub or in one section, and we understand it's about determining what information you as a school and a setting need to gather on learner progress, and how you're going to use that. And it may be that you determine that you want to map things and you want spreadsheets and matrix and the tracking systems that you want to use, but it's really important that that's a decision that you make and you understand the reasons behind that. I think, again, decoupling assessment and accountability, it's just remembering that previously those tracking mechanisms were really important, not only for being able to report perhaps on learner progress, but because we had to report externally on attainment, whereas there is no requirement now for any judgments on attainment to be reported externally, where we'll never have to say X, 80% of our learners are working at progression step 3 for this statement of what matters, or this one. So it is only for the purposes, whatever information you gather on learner progress is for your school setting to identify next steps. So I think it's so important. There will be spreadsheets and matrix, I'm sure, that schools find helpful, but it's for each school to work on that. Any support they want in helping frame what they need from their assessment arrangements and supporting them, of course, we can come and support on that. But we've definitely moved past from a system of being able to give tracking tools and assessment sheets. Because what we've got to constantly remember is we will be assessing progress of our learners against the curriculum that we have designed, the learning intentions, the outcomes that we have designed, not against any nationally articulated ones. And again, that at that point, it's worth reminding everybody those descriptions of learning that we've got, which are really helpful for informing our curriculum design, and not to be used for tick lists for assessment or one-off judgments. They don't replace those previous levels, and that's something we can work with you on a more bespoke level when we come out and spend time with you if needed.
Diolch, Kath. I know time is running against us now, so Tom, I'm going to direct this question to you. What professional learning on curriculum design is forming part of the teacher training programme?
Well, it's a good question, and I can see many friendly names in the participant list of people who've worked with us, with our student teachers in the last couple of years. I mean, we rewrote our PGCE programs from a blank sheet of paper and our BA primary program in order to try and be fit for purpose for the new curriculum for Wales. We've very much had to go on a bit of a voyage of discovery ourselves. You know, we were not really involved with the pioneer process as much as people might expect, but we do have a little bit of time and space. And curriculum design aspects are now an integral part of the ITE programs that we do. And our student teachers do have space and time to really chew this stuff over. And they do have the kind of critical thinking skills to have some very interesting conversations. I mean, some of the best conversations I've had with students in the past academic year has been when we have thrown ourselves together in a room and really kind of chewed over some of the implications of the curriculum documents, you know, and they don't just take it all and say it's all great either. You know, they do find the sort of knotty problems and the things that contradict each other and all of that. So we do include it as an integral part, and we are very much hoping to involve school colleagues a lot more in providing that professional learning. I mean, we have our YouTube channel, we have our podcast, we have our research webinars in which we're desperately trying to kind of push what we've got out into the community, because we feel we have a responsibility to do that for our colleagues. So, you know, feel free to access any of that. And do use your student teachers if you have them. Yes, be careful. Don't see them as the sort of answer to all your ills, because they are kind of learning how to get kids to sit down and be quiet and listen to them, and, you know, make lessons last an hour and not an hour and 20 minutes and that kind of thing. But they do have useful knowledge, and they're often very, very interested in sharing it as well. Also, I would encourage anybody who's connected with us through the partnership to make use of us as well, because we're on this journey with you. We're doing some interesting things. We don't have all the answers. There's certain things we can't do. We can't really experiment with classes of pupils the way that you can. But we're very keen to work together in a really joined up way on that, and to play our part as much as we possibly can in just helping out in those areas where we can.
Diolch, Tom. Right, time is against us. So as I said, diolch yn fawr iawn. If anybody does have any other questions, we'll ensure that they are responded to directly. Hoffwn i gymryd y cyfle i ddiolch i bawb i'r panel heddi sydd wedi bod gyda ni, i Tom, i Kath, i Craig, i Nicky. Thanks once again all. A diolch yn fawr iawn i chi sydd wedi bod yn gwylio'r cyflwyniad yma. Thank you for everyone who's joined us today, and we look forward to meeting you once again in the future. Prynawn da bawb, diolch yn fawr iawn.